So I am doing a little catch up from the perspective of the environmental chair for the MammAlive Foundation, and what I thought I'd do is kind of a review of just what's happening in Canada, and then a um, little call to action. Um, I'm not sure how many international members. I guess international members will be watching this later. So I want to take a look at oh, so I'm just trying to figure out what to forward. There we go. So I'm looking at where the planet is right now, but more encouraging international members to look at these specific issues with regards to their country. And of course, I'll be focusing on Canada. So I'm looking at what are some of the recent studies, environmental studies, and needs for updated legislation and some news about that. And also what are the most urgent concerns that we should be focusing on at this time, or that I've chosen to focus on specifically for the MammAlive Foundation. So we have had a recent study indicating that there are very high levels of PFAs, so polyfluoroalkyl substances, or otherwise known as forever chemicals, in the Great Lakes Basin groundwater. And this is not good. It's indicating that high levels are falling within the rain. And we know already from our work with MammAlive that there are strong links to cancer and obesity, reproductive issues, and of course breast health issues. And the list of possible sources of this are pretty well endless. We have PFA has become insidious in so many aspects of our lives, but the good thing is that this study will hopefully bring more awareness to the fact that there's great concern for the health of our wildlife as well as human beings. Now I've lost my, oh there, I keep losing my cursor. The PFAs, of course, are commonly found in all kinds of things that we use daily, such as the water and grease-proof packaging from fast food. Now, there has been some headway with Environmental Defense Canada and a number of American environmental groups lobbying to get various of the top or most popular health fast food stores to remove the packaging, the offensive packaging with PFAs, and there has been success on a number of fronts. I don't have the list specifically of ones that are that have removed it, but we do have. You can go to Environmental Defense and you can see articles about which ones we should be targeting to encourage to remove it from our packaging. Not, of course, that I'm promoting eating fast food in any way. But also on a daily basis, we're getting exposure to PFAs in our sales receipts, our toys for children. A study from Dollarama, our Dollar Tree, showed that a good 67% of items in Dollar Tree had PFAs in them. Non-stick cookware, firefighting foam, even our shampoo and our sunscreen. And of course, we'll find it in high amounts around airports and military bases and around manufacturing plants. They've even found it on the summit of Mount Everest, which is very distressing. So we know ourselves of how the food packaging can break down into particles, then it becomes further broken down, carried into the atmosphere, into the dust in our homes, into the atmosphere through the wind, and then up in the atmosphere further breaks down and is carried back into the into the environment where it's bioaccumulated by being consumed by the wildlife and then being consumed further up the food chain. Why do I keep losing my cursor? Okay. Another disturbing study that we've seen recently that we were somewhat aware of already, but again, it's good that it's come more to light within public knowledge, is high levels of PFAs in long-lasting makeup. So any of the makeup that is advertised as waterproof or long-lasting they found to have high levels of the per and perfluoroalkyl substances. So our liquid lipsticks, our foundations, our waterproof mascara. Out of 231 Canadian and American cosmetics tested, including everything that we put on our face, foundations, makeup for lips, eyes, concealers, powder, sprays, more than 52% of them had high levels of fluorine, which is what suggests the presence of PFAs. And only one of the 17 Canadian products tested had PFAs actually labeled in the ingredient list. And that brings us to the major issue about PFAs and makeup in Canada especially, is that unlike food, chemicals in lipstick and other makeup products are almost entirely unregulated still in the US and Canada. So we need ways to put companies to task and get them to label them, but also, of course, remove them initially. So I'm just going to move on to the good news, which is that there is an update coming of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act here, Bill C-21. It's been a very long time since it's been updated. In fact, over 20 years. It was last in 1998, I believe. And the good thing about it is it's finally recognizing that for the first time we have the right to a healthy environment. So this bill is actually otherwise known as Strengthening Environmental Protection for a Healthier Canada. It's a very sad state of affairs that Canada lags behind about 156 other countries. And but the good thing is that we should be able to provide citizens with the ability to persecute those polluters. It introduces critical improvements to the previous CPA, as I said, like recognition for the first time that we have a right to a healthy environment. And the new rules should require the assessment of the impact of toxic chemicals on the vulnerable populations, especially racialized communities and workers who are the ones who are disproportionately exposed to toxics because they live nearby or have high workplace exposures, as well as people who may be at increased risk because of their stage of life, making them more sensitive, or to impacts on children and pregnant women. We also want there to be a commitment to examine the actual cumulative impact of multiple chemicals. We want mandatory ingredient labeling of everyday products like flame retardants on furniture and complete disclosure, including fragrance ingredients on cosmetics and cleaning products. There will be several regulations and consultations on the rules, and those are set to begin in September with actions promised by next spring. So we really need to encourage everyone we know and ourselves as an association to really put the pressure on, because this is very important. And for anybody who has a similar kind of legislation in their own country, really find ways to put that pressure on. This action is even more important during the COVID pandemic because we've learned that pre-existing health conditions increase people's susceptibility to the virus, and we know that exposure to toxic chemicals can be a key factor in reducing our overall health and ability to fight disease. I forgot to show this as I was speaking. So this is, again, just a little review of the changes. Mandatory labeling, commitment to examine cumulative impact, etc. The other good news is that we have Bill C-230, which is finally, I made reference to people who are particularly susceptible, like racialized communities. Well, we finally have a national strategy respecting environmental racism and environmental justice act. So environmental racism is what occurs when environmental policies or practices are intentionally or unintentionally result in disproportionate negative impacts on certain individuals, groups, or communities based on their race or color, as well as unequal access to environmental benefits. So we see this as being critical to examine the link between race and socioeconomic status and environmental risk. And if it's passed, it would require the federal environment minister to develop a strategy on environmental racism and environmental justice. And this is a first. It's a Canadian first. Canada's long overdue for this legislation, especially because parallel legislation requirements have been in place in the US since 1994. So again, with the House of Commons due to break for the summer, we really need to urge all parties to move this bill through in the final stages of legislation as soon as Parliament resumes. An important sub-amendment of this bill is that it will stipulate the national strategy has to include information and statistics related to the location of the environmental hazards, and it has to examine the link, as I've mentioned, between race, socioeconomic status, and environmental risks. So, moving along. What are our urgent concerns, especially in the time of COVID-19? We've had a lot of speculation over the last year that I'm sure you're well aware of as to not necessarily what the causes are of COVID-19, although there's been conspiracy theories, etc., linking COVID-19 with various other concerns in our environment, in our world. But the issue is that there are links. It's not necessarily the origin, but the links to things like 5G technology. I had written a blog a year ago, which I hesitated to publish because of all of these conspiracy theories, and I didn't want it to be look as if we were promoting this idea. But the reality is that 5G is one of those things like the toxic chemicals that compromises our health. So I'd just like to do a quick review of the 5 reasons it's dangerous, 5 ways to help protect ourselves, and 5 ways to try to limit, at least delay rollout in your area. The reality is we have already satellites out in space covering the globe, and it's going to be very difficult to stop it, but at least we can try to find ways to protect ourselves and minimize it. So research has already shown that the effects of EMFs in the form of 4G already exists, has proven the negative impact of microwave frequency on our health with adverse effects, and includes the adverse effects include neurological damage, various dementias, endocrine hormonal stress, fertility issues, oxidative stress, free radical damage, leading, and DNA breaks into our DNA, leading to mutations, cell death, and even cancer. And of course, the very young and unborn are particularly vulnerable. So what we need is where 4G, what we know is that where 4G recommendations for homes require a minimum of 100 meters from an antenna, 5G requires the number of antennas and towers to exponentially increase to possibly 1 for every 2 to 10 homes. So we'll be literally surrounded in our neighborhoods, which is quite terrifying. The reasons why it's dangerous and the reasons why it's apparently necessary in the rollout of things is to supply the Internet of Things. So the 5G system is designed specifically to support all of the smart devices coming into our homes or already in our homes, like fridges, cars, phones. But this just means more radiation exposure. And it will be especially a hardship, or already is, for people who already suffer from EMF sensitivities, and those numbers will likely increase. As I mentioned, the satellite systems are, when I wrote this, were being set up, but they're already out there, hundreds and hundreds of them. And so that will result in the need for even stronger 5G compatible devices, emitting even higher EMF levels around you in your home. So one of the first things we can do is not buy into those 5G compatible devices, because that just invites that the constant, those devices will be constantly searching, constantly emitting those frequencies. And we know that no safety testing at all has been done to assure the public or humans or the environment, assure the public of the human or environmental impacts of 5G, but there is enough evidence of the negative effects of EMFs on wildlife populations, from bees to birds and even forests, for us to really seriously consider promotion of more research from governmental organizations. There has been a study done by a Magda Havas in association with I can't remember her first name, Tiang, I think it might be Amanda. So Magda Havas is a retired professor with Trent University in Peterborough in Ontario. And I don't know if you copy, I could probably copy that link there at the bottom and put it in the chat, but that actually leads directly to a study that she published this year that does show that COVID-19 attributed cases and deaths are statistically higher in states and counties. This was done in the States with 5th generation millimeter wave wireless telecommunications already set up. So I can Not sure if I can copy or send it to you in an email. I'm not sure if I can actually do that at this point. So then 5 ways to help protect yourself from 5G and EMFs in general. Limiting your exposure, of course, we all know. Cell phones, laptops, place it in airplane mode whenever possible. Don't carry it on your body. And if you have to carry it on your body, place it with the screen facing towards you. And when talking, ideally use an air tube headset. You can find these air tube headsets that are different from the regular headsets that simply pipe in through, I guess, an empty tube, so you don't have the electrical exposure right by your ears. And when not in use, of course, make sure your device is placed at least 6 feet away from you. Oh, that makes me think I should move my phone over here. And do not place it in your bedroom to charge overnight. Put it in another room. If it's your only source of communication with people, then of course put it 6 feet away. Also consider buying or renting or borrowing or going in on an EMF meter with some friends or family so that you can check the levels in your own home. And also consider, instead of Wi-Fi, installing wired internet service using Ethernet cables. Even a cell phone can apparently be connected to a USB cable if it's necessary. And one of the things that I was unaware of before was that when traveling in a car or an elevator, because you're completely surrounded by metal, your device will be continually powering up to find a signal, and your exposure level increases in those situations. So keep your phone close to the car window or turn it off when it's not needed. And then, of course, 5 ways to help prevent or delay the rollout. Seek out, there are a lot of 5G awareness groups that are probably already in your city. Raise awareness within your circle of friends, or encourage them to watch some of the documentaries that are already out there, like the 5G Summit or Generation Zapped, or the documentary with the 5G Trojan Horse. Encourage your regional municipality to watch that Trojan Horse as well, because it follows what happened in the city of Houston when they were one of the first to roll out 5G. And also start petitions to educate and express your concerns. And especially consider the children in your lives. Approach your local board of education and do warn them of the increasing health risks that 5G exposes for this generation of children. We've already know that they're spending all day now in the last year in front of their laptops. So this is a serious concern for children. So there is another, speaking of COVID-19 and connections with environmental issues and contaminants, there have been also several studies done, or they're really more hypotheses. Some of you might have heard of Dr. Zach Bush. He presented a paper on this, actually I think it was possibly even to Monsanto, but that I have yet to hear where that went. It was probably not taken very seriously. But this particular study, written by Stephanie Seneff, who's a senior researcher at MIT, is a paper hypothesizing the connection between our susceptibility to COVID virus and exposure to glyphosate from many sources in our world. And it's really insidious. Glyphosate is in all of us now. It's pervasive in our entire world. It's everywhere. It's in our food. It's in our air. It's a particular concern is that with the move, with environmental, it's a sort of an issue of unintended consequences with the increase of a turn towards biofuels worldwide in an effort to move away from oil. We've started to create biofuels made with the waste matter of crops that were sprayed even in while they were growing, or as a desiccant to help with harvest. So they're made from the waste matter of these crops, and then the industrial waste runs off from agriculture to the waterways. And what this study found was there was a really significantly higher incidence of, or higher rates of COVID in areas where all of that wastewater ran off and collected from agricultural land, collected in cities, major cities where we saw high incidence. New Orleans, New York. Sorry, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I don't have it written on, but and then also proximity areas where we live in great proximity to highways and airports, because we're actually even breathing in the glyphosate through our air. So again, to read that study, I can share that link with you as well. I have no idea how I'm doing for time, but what I'd like to address now is that we've had a very depressing year for obvious reasons. Um, but what I'd like to address is this grief. Um, Never mind that a lot of people are now starting to feel as though things are coming back to normal. I think it's really important that during this past year, many of us have become more aware of our planet, of nature, because we're going into nature and experiencing it more and perhaps developing more relationship with it. But what we need to address is the ecological grief that many scientists and conservationists have been experiencing for a long time now. In fact, there is a great need for grief counselors for the planet. And my own brother, who wrote a political thriller several years ago, toured it with the country, and he, in fact, in his book, predicted so much of what happened in the last year. It's quite uncanny. But what he was finding in place after place was that people were reading his book, and it was very enlightening. But it was leaving them. It was leading to them to a place of acknowledging that they felt helpless. In what they could do, and so we have this ecological grief that we need to address in this world. And what we need to do is reach out to our community. We um, just move. Um, we need to reach out, find our community. We have here within MammAlive, of course, a great community, but I believe that it's really important that we start acknowledging the grief that is affecting us and our health, even as women, as stewards for the planet. As we acknowledge ourselves to be within MammAlive, we really need to look at our role, but take that into consideration in our community. We need to learn more about the value of biodiversity. We need to teach that to our children. Um, because we are teaching the next generation to love and value and respect our local ecosystem every time we take them out into nature. So we need to continue to do that, because, as my last point says, what we come to love the most, we grieve the most. So if we want people to take action, we need this next generation to really form more of a relationship with their local ecosystem, with their environment, to really create an understanding of the world and how it works, and how every single piece of it is crucial in the balance. We have to stop being as so arrogant as human beings, and believing that we're entitled to dominion over everything. So we don't need to feel alone in our anger if we reach out and find our community. So this final slide is just an encouragement not to be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. I really like this. I found it a while ago, so I wanted to share it. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So I would like to end this as an invitation to you, to all of us, to choose a piece of your world, whether it's an area of the forest or a lake or some piece of nature that's important to you, and work as hard as you can to save it and bring awareness to it. Teach your children to love it. Teach your community to love it. Because this is the only way I can see a way forward to impressing upon the world the need to look after the planet so that it can look after us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raissa. It was very informative and heartfelt. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now we move on to the second presentation. I'll hit stop.